I never thought the day would come in which I would make a full-fledged devoid of logic video for an MCU movie. There would always be some silly aspects for Marvel movies, but never enough to the point of justifying an entire video. However, I think Ant-Man Quantumania is one of the most stupid MCU movies to the point where the devoid of logic aspects were overflowing. Within the first 10 minutes of the movie, it immediately requires a major contrivance for the entire story to exist. And that contrivance is Janet Van Dyne not telling anyone about an extremely dangerous enemy in the quantum realm. Even when Cassie Lang brings out a quantum device that can send a signal down there, she doesn't warn them about Kang. Instead, she just acts like an unjustified crazy person and haphazardly pulls the power on this device, as if it were my mom unplugging my PC at 1 AM while playing Minecraft. It's kind of wild here that she isn't open and explains her reasoning. These are all rational people and they would most likely listen to Janet's warnings, given that she lived down there for many years. The writer tries to play it off as Janet not wanting to go into it because she's ashamed of the bad things she's done, and probably thinks that she can get away with not telling them about Kang. Which, news alert, you live in a family that's obsessed with the quantum realm and actively wants to explore it, so you should probably give them some warnings. It's an inevitable conflict that you can't ignore. So yeah, it's obviously this way so that they can have this malfunction, and I honestly feel like it would be better if Cassie Lang made a design flaw, and that's why they get sucked into the quantum realm. Because when you think about it, Cassie Lang has to be absurdly smart for being able to make this, regardless of having Hank's journals. Like, her intellect is kind of swept under the rug, and maybe the writer should have explored the carelessness of Cassie Lang wanting to make a contribution to society, and the mounting pressure of her family all being heroes. So maybe she cut corners and rushes along this tech so that she could feel validated in this family that's hard to live up to, given their massive accomplishments. Personally, I feel like this already gives Cassie Lang more depth as a character, instead of just being a generic good doer who basically has no flaws. Besides her getting arrested at a protest, which really isn't a flaw. Have her deal with the consequences of sending her loved ones to the quantum realm, and have her rise to the occasion and save them. That's a proper hero's journey. This actually gives her a tangible character arc, and if I were to ask you what her arc for the movie currently is, you'd probably struggle. Moving along into the quantum realm, the entire setting is extremely confusing and inconsistent, or it lacks any semblance of logic because the writer doesn't make an attempt at explaining anything within the quantum realm. Some things are explained, but there's just so much random shit that's constantly happening in every scene that it turns this movie into a silly mess. Now, this wouldn't really bother me, but the MCU is pretty fleshed out overall and is based in logic. Like, you can generally explain anything that has happened in the past with complete understanding. So the issue with this movie is that they go full-blown into wacky territory, and it feels jarring for the tone. I just have so many questions like, how are they even breathing here? Why are there aliens that look like broccoli? What is the science behind these floating ships? Anything regarding populations, how they even live, how they're making these cities. And I can really keep going on, but you get it. It feels like Ant-Man Quantumania turned into Rick and Morty, which isn't a coincidence because the writer for the movie came from that show. However, all the silly and unexplained sci-fi elements in Rick and Morty are fine because the show never takes itself that seriously, which I guess Quantumania is trying to be more humorful, but it normally falls flat in my opinion, and is always kind of awkward.
How many holes do you have? I'm sorry, is that a personal question? I don't have any holes.
In essence, the entire quantum realm just feels like an excuse to throw whatever the writer wants on screen, and then for any potential explanation, they'll stamp the word quantum in front of it.
It's like a satellite for deep space or the ocean, but quantum. There's quantum people in the quantum realm.
So basically, the entire setting for the movie is devoid of logic, but it is by design. So getting back to the story, Scott and Cassie are split up from the Van Dyne dysfunctional family team, and they get attacked by Kang's army while they're with some rebels. What happens here is probably one of the most unappealing fight sequences visually, which is really sad considering that the environment they're in essentially has endless possibilities for how it could look, but for some reason it looks really dull. During this fight scene, it's revealed that Cassie has her own suit, which is immediately confusing because she's been in life-threatening scenarios on multiple occasions earlier on, and for some reason she chooses not to activate her suit. She had to be saved by her father while free-falling, they got chased by a massive alien, and she ran around during this action scene in normal clothes for an unnecessarily long time. Why is this the case? Because we wouldn't have this totally awesome suit reveal moment. It's also kind of funny that Scott and Cassie have an entire educational interaction about using the suit, while literally being in the middle of the battlefield. But luckily, Kang's androids are comically ineffective. At the end of the scene, MODOK gets revealed, and writing-wise, it's really sad that he's a constant punching bag for jokes. It really undercuts the severity of the situation, and it's really hard to feel a sense of danger when this comical face is staring at you. Visually, I'm surprised they didn't try to make the design of the face more unhuman-like or is more malformed, instead of just enlarging it. It looks ridiculous, and this character design decision is devoid of logic to me. I understand that it's supposed to be a big head, but it feels like their intentions were making MODOK look funny on purpose, since the writing surrounding him constantly degrades him for humor. Like, I wish I could unsee this shot of his ass, and I did not appreciate being visually assaulted. This is just the visual side of things, and his story later on gets laughably bad. Looking over at the Van Dyne family, their journey doesn't really have much impact on the overall plot, and is mostly the director or writer playing out their fantasy of making a Star Wars movie. In Quantumania though, the things that happen are so bizarre that they are straight up confounding or cringe-inducing. Like this random interaction in the desert where Janet cuts off an alien's arm which buys her a ship, this broccoli alien trying to hit on Hope, and the controls of this alien ship having condom joysticks that Hank miraculously knows how to fly. At this point, I assume the writer doesn't care about any of this making sense, and is batting away the notion of logic under the guise of comedy. But I don't really find this funny in any way, and I'm constantly in a WTF expression. Also, there's this really weird dialogue interaction that is so awkward that I don't know how it made it into the final script.
That guy?
I was down here for 30 years, Henry. I had needs.
Oh my God.
Look, I get it. I've got needs too.
Oh my God!
I wonder if Michael Douglas had an existential crisis while reading the script and saw this dialogue paired with him getting sucked off by two alien fleshlights. So all of these scenes are essentially driven by the mystery of who this unknown traveler was at the beginning of the movie. And this mystery is the opposite of intriguing because everyone in the audience already knows that it's Kang and what he does. Janet is basically teasing the mega threat at the end of every scene, and it's so dumb because why wouldn't she just tell Hope and Hank earlier? Why wait so long? They were literally walking in an alien forest for a while with not much to do. Also, during Janet's info dump about her past with Kang, she reveals that the multiverse is real to Hank, which is again kind of weird that she would withhold this crazy scientific revelation from her husband, who would love to know about that. She has all of this reality-altering scientific information that she can do so much good with that she for some reason withholds. Now that Kang is finally revealed in the narrative, that means we can have a scene between him and Scott. There's nothing wrong with this scene, and I just wanted to point it out as being one of the few good scenes in the movie. It feels like whiplash going from all the goofy shit that was happening to this scene. But hell, I'll take any ounce of Kang at this rate to move away from the annoying comedy. From here, Kang threatens to kill Cassie if Scott doesn't shrink down the power source for his ship that Janet exploded. He obviously agrees, and this scene is kind of interesting, but there are still multiple things about it that don't make sense. For starters, Scott is in a possibility field that splits himself whenever he is met with making a decision. This exponentially goes out of control, and in this crowd, a Baskin-Robbins Scott shows up, which obviously is impossible given that all of these versions derive from his current self. So the writer is making a joke that completely breaks the logic of the scene. They then eventually work together and act like a colony of ants, which thematically is cool, but at no point is this a clever solution because it's completely detached from basic physics. Finally, this World War Z stack of zombies falls down, and Hope flies in to rescue Scott just in time. How convenient. Then together, all their possible selves combine back into themselves, which isn't explained and I have no idea why that happened. But they both shoot shrinking pin particles into the core and it shrinks. Now, this is immediately inconsistent to what just happened before, where Scott fired a pin particle and it did absolutely nothing to the surface. But hey, if we fire like 20 of them at different points of the surface, then surely that would work. which it somehow does, and it's also convenient that it shrinks down to the exact size that they needed it to be. If they shot it with 20 and it actually worked this time, then wouldn't it have shrunken down significantly smaller than what it is now? Janet only enlarged it with 4 Pym particles, so the math doesn't add up, or the barrier just so happened to negate the perfect amount of Pym particles for the math to check out. Whatever, there's so many questions that you have to ignore to enjoy this. After this, Kang gets the power source for his ship, and instead of instantly plugging it in and leaving, he decides to give a villain monologue to Janet, which is probably one of the most classic villain tropes at this point, and it's kind of funny that Marvel are still doing this 31 movies in, not including TV shows. During this monologue, Kang wants to know what Janet saw when she touched the Neuralink on his ship, which allowed her to see his memories or whatever. However, it seemed pretty clear what she saw in the past, and basically said she saw him destroying planets and timelines. But for some reason, Kang wants to know the specifics, I guess? I don't know. This is obviously happening to stall for time, and Kang also makes a speech to his androids, which these are androids, I'm pretty sure, and I don't understand why he would need to make a speech to them, or why he would even care about the rest of the population of the quantum realm. Just freaking leave, my dude. Not to mention that you left Scott and Hope alive to come back and attack you. You've literally been waiting for this moment for years, and you're delaying your own departure. Also, a funny little moment during Kang and Janet's interaction was that she said trillions of people will die due to timelines as a whole getting deleted. Now, I'm pretty sure that number would be astoundingly bigger than trillions, given that we're talking about the universe here. If Earth almost has a population of 8 billion people, then I'm sure we'd be getting into numbers higher than the trillions. This was just one tiny interaction that doesn't matter. Right after this, Cassie is being escorted back to her cell, and by some massive oversight from Kang, he didn't take away her Pym particles or even her suit, and she escapes. That would be like taking Iron Man prisoner and leaving him in his suit to where he could fly away at any moment. The second this happened in the theater, I was shocked by how lazy the writing was here. It was also funny how she enlarged one of the androids, and this group of guards coming down the hallway doesn't see him, I guess? Also, she shrinks down in plain view of this group of guards walking towards her. So to add to the incompetent bad guy army list, they are blind, have slow reaction times, and have terrible aim. They are starting to sound like something very familiar, which, since I'm already making this comparison with Star Wars, Kang and MODOK are basically like Palpatine and Darth Vader, especially since Kang can use the Force and utilize his energy beams. Coincidence? I think not. Then, like 5 minutes later, Janet also escapes captivity by herself. At this point in the movie, I completely gave up, because if they refuse to put any handcuffs on their prisoners, and there's basically no ramifications to being caught, then there is no danger for these characters. The fact that the writer did this twice is flat out insulting. Hank Pym gets attacked by MODOK while in the Fleshlight ship, and it crash lands. Luckily though, MODOK doesn't even bother to check if Hank is alive and doesn't confirm the kill. Kind of betrays the name of MODOK, since his name stands for mechanized organism designed only for killing. So not even checking to see if a target who he also hates is actually dead is wild. When Hank gets out of the crash, he finds his colony of smart ants that got sucked into the quantum realm at the start of the movie. It's revealed here that the ants went through a time dilation zone that made it to where they lived thousands of years in a single day. They created an advanced civilization and are now a thriving society who seeked out Hank to save him. This is probably the most convenient thing I've ever seen in a movie, and now the good guys have an ant army out of nowhere. A literal Deus Ex Machina that they try to downplay as being clever, since Hank got random transmissions in his hearing aid or whatever. But with so much random nonsense happening throughout the movie, it's hard to take anything as being foreshadowing. Also, these quantum realm mechanics are really inconsistent. There's just time dilation pockets in random areas. Going back to Cassie, she breaks out the leader of the rebels, and they hatch a plan to hijack Kang's broadcast to tell everyone to rebel. There's a couple minor things here that are questionable, like Cassie not knowing how to open the cell, and luckily smashes a guard's face into it, which opens it. Although this is contradicted 5 minutes later when the rebel leader inputs a code into a panel that unlocks it. Not sure how she knows that, but okay. And the other thing being that they somehow know where the broadcasting room is in this foreign compound. If I can barely navigate Hogwarts with a dedicated map in the bottom left of my screen, then I don't know how they could find a very specific room in this massive building that they've also never been in before. Unless if there's just a convenient map on the wall marking the broadcasting room. Kang then sends MODOK after Cassie, and he eventually bests her and is able to kill her. But wait, she has plot armor, and MODOK decides not to kill her and instead gets distracted by Scott walking around in the background. Like, this is a guaranteed way not to make anyone care about your action when you know there will be no consequences. The even crazier thing is that this happens again, and MODOK chooses to talk to Cassie instead of killing her. Like, I just don't care anymore. Then she turns big and wrecks MODOK. Their following scene together is probably the worst scene in the entirety of the MCU.
Tell me what to be.
I don't know, just don't be a dick.
It's too late.
It's never too late to stop being a dick.
This is the worst!
Just don't be a dick, forehead. And then he turns into a good guy? Like, what? Him sacrificing himself and quote-unquote becoming an Avenger is such a bizarre turn of events, especially with how they treat his death scene. It's so awkward, it tries to be funny when it clearly isn't, and then the music climaxes as an attempt to punctuate this scene as being a big moment when it's not. At this point in the theater, when originally watching it, I looked over at my girlfriend in complete shock, and we were just like, what are we even watching right now? I want to put you into the mind space of Darren, aka MODOK. This is a man who hated and was trying to kill Ant-Man, and in the process, got banished to the quantum realm. This turned him into a disfigured monster, and the amount of resentment towards Scott for doing this must have been unimaginable. Kang then manipulated this man into becoming a weapon, and he massacred thousands of people and even loved doing so. His mental state should be long gone from killing people for so long and should not be salvageable by any degree. So the fact that he even has this arc to begin with is absurd. I don't think there is any realistic angle in which you could give MODOK, a being so filled with rage and revenge for so long, a redemption arc. And it's even crazier that to change his mind, a character just tells him to not be a dick. And that is what made him change his entire motivation. Jesus Christ, I can't. So finally we arrive to some Kang carnage, and through his showcase here, this is probably one of the most glaring examples of nerfing your villain in real time. He starts out completely wiping the floor with these rebels, in which if this blue beam touches them, they instantly go poof. However, when he fights Ant-Man and friends, if he shoots them with this beam of disintegration or whatever that I assume like erases them from time, they just get knocked back. So right away, it isn't consistent despite these two events happening minutes apart. And I don't believe their suits should be stopping this since they aren't made by vibranium or anything. Also, Kang has the literal force and doesn't use it a single time, along with being able to fly around on a platform. Like, couldn't he force hold the three of them here in this one spot instead of giving yet another villain monologue? Then he gets overwhelmed by Hank's ant army, and Kang doesn't use his abilities logically. When Kang can use any of his powers like flying away from the ants to safety, erasing them all with his energy beam that cuts through people like paper, or even just force pushing ants away, it's crazy that he instead opts to throw up a force field that isn't viable to keep up at all times. This is supposed to be an Avengers level threat, and he lost to motherfucking Ant-Man. That is by far the biggest buzzkill I've ever seen. I went into this movie hyped to see a menacing and crazy villain who's extremely powerful, but all I got was a buffoon who lost to ants. How the hell did this man conquer a galaxy and best in military strengths of entire worlds when he can't even overcome an army of ants who can only melee him up close? We only got to see him fight for like a few minutes, and in that time, it was a mess from a writing standpoint. After this battle, Janet opens up a portal from Kang's device back to their homeworld. They all get out, but just as Scott is about to step in, he chooses to stay behind and stop Kang from getting to Earth. The following fight is actually good and is very visceral. It shows the immense strength of Kang, and for once this scene actually made me respect him as a villain. He's obliterating Scott in hand-to-hand combat, and this was really one of the only things the movie got right. Scott realizes that he has no chance, and corrupts the power source filling the portal, and Hope comes back to help Scott defeat Kang. Now, this was a pretty powerful ending at the moment because it was as if Scott was destroying his only way home in his life with his daughter to defeat the villain. For once, an action has drastic consequences. But nope. That notion is instantly disregarded because Cassie Lang is a brainiac and somehow fixes the portal in like 1 minute flat. This essentially robs the entire ending from any sort of impact for me because it erases the weight of this major decision to destroy his only way home. So the heroes live happily ever after. The Council of Kings does make me excited for upcoming movies, but given all the controversy around Jonathan Majors, I'm not sure what his future in the MCU is going to look like. So yeah, that was Ant-Man Quantumania. I'm sorry this video is so delayed. My channel got demonetized, so I held on to this video for over a month and waited to release it. I already reapplied and made a lot of changes, but I was still denied. So I'm going to make nothing off of YouTube for the next 3 months. To combat this, I'm starting a Patreon and I would love your support. You can chip in whatever you want, and I'm grateful in advance if you choose to support me. It's honestly scary to rely on YouTube financially and then for them to suddenly pull the plug with no warning. I'll leave a link in the description and more details about Patreon in the comments. Thank you for watching as always and have a good day.